Hello, good evening, happy Tuesday. It's Tuesday. You know what that means? It is Growth Groove with Dr. Ericka Day. I always get so excited about Tuesdays. Do you want to know why I get so excited about Tuesdays? Well, the first thing is my podcast, Better with Dr. Ericka. The new episodes release every Tuesday. So for me, Tuesday morning is like a party because I release a new podcast episode. Then we move from that party to I close the day out with another party when I hang out with you all for Growth Groove with Dr. Ericka. So it's a blessing to be able to spend that much time with you on Tuesday. So Tuesday is like my day with the people. So first, housekeeping things. If you know someone that needs this, tag them. If you know someone that could benefit, also share. Sharing is caring. The last thing is if you're watching it later, don't even worry about it. Just stick hashtag replay in the comments. And, we'll still give you some love, but I would love to know you are here. So as you come in tonight, do me a favor. Let me know what is going on in your world and where you are coming in from. I would love to know where you're watching from. That would be great. So I'll keep an eye on the chat and we're going to make that happen. The next thing is the title of our talk today is 5 ways to deal with the anxiety about going back to school. Because you know what? We're still in this pandemic. We want to be done. The pandemic's not done with us. So I wanted to talk about it because I'm currently, as you see, hotel background. I'm in Boston. A lot of them are starting school September 1st or right after Labor Day. But I know in Atlanta Public Schools started school actually this week. So this is really happening. School is really starting, and we're in the midst of so many changes, but I know people are still concerned because for a lot of people, pardon me, I don't have COVID, my nose just itching. Going back to school right now, these kids aren't going back to school virtual, they're going back in person, and that can have a certain amount of anxiety around it, given that we are still in the midst of this pandemic. So let me tell you who I am really quickly. I am your host, Dr. Ericka, Harvard-trained double board certified psychiatrist and podcast host. I am so passionate about helping people be better, do better, and live better. I do that through my adult telepsychiatry, my speaking, my books, including Fix Your Fairy Tale, A Woman's Guide to a Great Life, Love, and Legacy, and my podcast, Better with Dr. Ericka. I do all of this to help busy people that give, and give, to help you put you back in your life. That's what I do. That's what I do all of this for. So thank you for coming. And why don't we make this happen? And yes, I understand. People are dreading school. And it's interesting because there's anxiety on the two sides of the coin. There are people that are anxious about kids going back into school. There are kids that are anxious about going back to school and going physically into school. And then on top of it, there are also some young people that are still virtual schooling and didn't feel like virtual schooling was their jam, and they're feeling anxious about that. And there's just so much around this going back to school, from the kids that are going to physical school to everyone dealing with these college students and hoping that people are taking appropriate precautions on campus and in dorms or their off-campus housing or in classes or the student union. That is just a lot. So I wanted to talk about some options and some things that we can do. And as you have questions or comments, please continue to drop those in the chat. I would love to see what you're thinking. So one of the reasons we're even talking about this is, we keep hearing these myths, and the myths are like, COVID's over. We're at the end of COVID. And we all know that's not true. The pandemic is still going strong. Because the pandemic is still going strong, all those things that it affects are still going on. So people are still stressed out, they're anxious, there's a lot of uncertainty. And given the recent developments with the Delta and Lambda variants, that there just is a lot of, I wouldn't just say confusion, but significant concern. And there's also concern about the people that aren't concerned. There's just concern everywhere because honestly, I'm in a hotel. I can count the entire time I've been in this hotel, I've seen 3 people with masks on other than myself. 3. 1, 2, 3. 3. I've seen 3. So it is reasonable that people would be anxious. But let's get into some solutions. So the first one is stop and pause. Reason I have stop and pause is sometimes we just have to interrupt that. A friend of mine, Dr. Romy, talks about the busy brain. But to interrupt this brain just going kind of like Kermit typing. And your brain's doing all of this. It's going in circles. It's running, running, running. And sometimes you just got to stop because it's very easy, especially when we're anxious, to start thinking about all the worst case scenarios and to literally follow it all the way down a rabbit hole. So you have to stop and pause to try to bring yourself out of the rabbit hole. Stopping and pauses gives you a chance to reset. Stopping and pausing also gives you a chance to start kind of reality testing what is really going on with the scenario. What is the real situation? What are your options? So after you stop and pause, it's always great to have a plan. So a lot of times with this going back to school, people may be telling you, well, this is what it is. But you still need your plan for your children or for yourself, because there are some adults that may actually be going back to school. And you need your plan. So you want to start planning as far as what is going to be how you handle mask wearing. How are your kids going to handle mask wearing? What's going on with mask mandates or things against mask mandates? Where your children are going to school, make sure you have the appropriate supplies, making sure you know what the policies are, where your child is going, knowing where the additional supports are, knowing where if something happens and there's a potential exposure, you can actually get COVID testing. If you are comfortable being vaccinated, if you're not already vaccinated, potentially planning to get vaccinated, especially if you have young people and your young people are 12 or over, and that's something you feel comfortable with. But just making these plans, planning kind of what the schedule is going to be, how you're going to handle when it's school time, when study time, how to have some time where you actually have connection and family time or fun time, but just starting to think ahead and plan. The next one is find your in-school resources that even though everything is all over, be it your kids virtual, they're not virtual, you want to know what resources the school has, because a lot of times they have resources that people aren't using. So you want to identify the counselors that are there, any resource people, principals, if there are any liaisons, if you're doing virtual, who are kind of the point people for technical difficulties, along with following up with studies. Is it directly the teacher? What's the best way to contact the teacher? You want to just have all of that information available, and also check the websites for the schools, or if there's something you're specifically concerned about, they may have handouts or worksheets or additional information for you for support. And this also includes, a lot of times they are a wealth of resources. So if you're having issues with internet or there's some type of access issue, just make sure that you still reach out. The next is connect with your parent crew. There's no reason for you to go through this alone. There's an entire country full of people going through the anxiety of dealing with getting their kids back in school, and they're also dealing with their children's anxiety. So a lot of times there is strength in support. It's one of the reasons why it's part of the Better 7, because there's those 7 areas that are very critical for having that better life, having that life you deserve. This that life you were created for. And one of those 7 areas is support. So it's very important to connect with your parent crew. There's no reason for you to be going through this alone or to feel isolated. The next is to check in. You want check-ins. You want check-ins with your young person. So, you want to check and kind of see what their emotional barometer is in the morning before school. You want to check during the day, especially if they're home and they're virtual. If they're not and they're going to school, you want to make sure you have a check-in after they get home, and also in the evening. But just checking in to just see how people are doing, because a lot of times if you don't check in, sometimes your kids just may not say what's going on. And I realize sometimes you have to be creative. Sometimes if you ask directly, they may not answer. But don't give up. If it's a situation where you have to play or watch a TV show together, listen to a podcast or something, and discuss it to get to what their feelings are, you can always do that. Or if you start cooking dinner or doing something with them and you're talking as you go, talking over a meal, all of those work. But I want you to be proactive with having check-ins, because you don't know what's going on. And this says, for our home, it's dealing with the frustration and stress that comes with my youngest, who's very social, starting her first year of high school. Oh my gosh, in the middle of the pandemic. Well, my middle daughter started as a first year in high school last year, but actually flourished in the virtual class setting, basically managing the different personality. Yes. And that has been one of the huge things that's happened in the pandemic, is that it's not a one size fit all, that there's some children that people would have never thought about virtual schooling, and then found that these kids just soared. I have friends who, some of their kids actually don't want to go back to school in person, that this was actually their jam. And I've seen so many people, and I've had this happen with patients and clients, where they have multiple children in the family. And just like you're talking about, where one child, this is their jam, the next child, this probably being virtual isn't their jam, and they just want to be social. And I realize that there is a difficult thing right now, given what happened when they released a lot of the mandates and people felt really comfortable just being out. A lot of people were out anyway, but when that happened, folks were just out. And one of the challenges has been of how you rein this in after folks got a taste of being out and they're ready to just be out. And one of the things I would encourage you is to continue to have open and honest conversation with your daughter, talking to her about facts. There are some really good resources for teens. I actually saw some of them. There's this wonderful video that I saw when I was doing a talk for Usher New Look. But just surrounding them with additional resources and kind of reinforcing, it's almost old school as far as, if this kid jumps off of, a cliff, are you jumping? Just because this is the rule for this child doesn't mean it's your rules. This is when I become the embodiment of my own mother, is that it is a challenge navigating this. And also the fact that there are children and young people that are social, that want to be social, that are craving being social after all this time in the pandemic, and just doing what you can do to keep them safe can be stressful. So you have to continue to educate them, encourage them, make sure that you have boundaries and are logical around them. And the other is, it's not on here, but the bonus was, it's okay to be anxious, and give yourself and your young people some grace, that there may be some anxiety around this, and that is quite natural. And the next thing is there's nothing wrong with, especially since this is still an unfamiliar territory and everything keeps changing. So that's one thing I always tell people to remember to have grace, because what was the solution last week, last month, last year may not be the solution now. So some of you may be dealing with school last year. You may need different solutions, especially if you were primarily virtual before and now you're back to in person. Is that it's, give yourself that grace, give yourself that space. And it's almost overused that it's okay to not be okay. But don't put so much pressure on yourself for all of this to flow naturally and to immediately have all of the solutions. If there was a guide and everybody could do this right, then we would have perfect kids and perfect lives. That's just not how any of us were created. That just isn't it. So let yourself off the hook for this expectation to be perfect and for everything to always be smoothly. Because as you saw, the first portion of the pandemic is things were a little rocky at times, and they may be rocky. And it is what it is. And just, this is a great time to lean on wherever your spiritual center is, to pray or to visualize, to help keep yourself centered and grounded through this, because there are so many competing interests. And I realize one of the things that's happening for you all as adults trying to help your young people navigate through this is that you still have all of the other stresses of the pandemic and adulting going on simultaneously where you're managing this. So back to giving yourself some grace. It's just really important. But, don't leave out the spiritual portion. So I've had you a while, so I'm not going to do a full recap, because you know what? You can always rewatch it. But I want to say thank you so much for coming. Again, I am your host, Dr. Ericka, Harvard trained double board certified psychiatrist and podcaster. I am passionate about helping people be better, do better, and live better. I do that through my telepsychiatry, my books, my speaking, and my podcast, Better with Dr. Ericka. I am just really here to help you make it through this because it's a lot. It's a lot. And I just want you to be as prepared and mentally healthy through this entire process. Nothing would make me happier than for you to make it through healthy, because to me, the goal out of all of this is it may be uncomfortable, it's inconvenient, but I want us to be able to sit up 2 or 3 years from now and have a cup of tea. You can have a cup of coffee, and we sit and chuckle and reminisce about how we all made it through the pandemic. Because the goal is to make it to the other side. Because everybody's not making it. Everybody's not still alive. So our goal is to make it. So I just want to provide support so that you have the support to be able to make it to the other side. Not only to just be alive, but to also have your mental health intact at the same time. So the couple things I want to tell you, quick announcements, is, as you know, Growth Groove with Dr. Ericka comes on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern on Facebook and YouTube. I look forward to seeing you. In the meantime, feel free to watch any other video, until next Tuesday at 7 when I'm back on here hanging out with you. And in the meantime, the other thing is also my podcast is going. So episodes drop on Tuesday. Last week was kind of special because we dropped an episode on Tuesday and a special Olympic themed episode on Friday, but it's still good even if the Olympics aren't going on. So I encourage you to listen to it. The episode Tuesday had Dr. Jada Moore Ruffin. The episode Friday had 2004 Olympian Dr. Roddy Ferguson. So I want to encourage you to listen to that. And if you want to catch out the pod, you can go to betterthepodcast.com or just go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and look for Better with Dr. Ericka. And this week, I'm excited because guess what came on this week? Let's see if we can find all the things. I feel like I never find things. So the episode that dropped today is Community Mentorship and Family with Eric Guster. You want to catch it out because he dropped some really good knowledge, especially we made it to the speed round, which wasn't speedy, and you want to catch it. So I want to encourage you to check that out. I want to say thank you for coming. Oh, thank you. I appreciate you saying my podcast is fire. I appreciate anybody that listens to it. And thank you for the wonderful review. All of you out there, if you can follow or subscribe it, and if you're on Apple Podcasts or Audible to rate and review it, it would just make me feel so good. But I'm going to let you out of here. Again, thank you so much. I will see you next Tuesday for Growth Groove with Dr. Eric. In the meantime, you can rewatch other videos, or you can check out my podcast and binge a little bit. But I'm so proud and so happy to be here. I appreciate you spending your time with me. You have your usual prescription to call at least one person and tell them that you love them. It will help fill your love bucket and theirs. And until then, have a better day.